Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is in Kyiv to discuss bilateral relations and continued support for Ukraine with President Volodymyr Zelensky.
The far right in Europe is on the rise. Can they strike alliances?
Dozens of family members of hostages held in Gaza have stormed into a financial meeting of Israel's parliament demanding the release of their relatives.
Storm Aisha destroys parts of Ireland and the UK, leaving hundreds of thousands of homes without electricity. FIFA has called for stricter racism measures following 2 incidents during matches in Italy and England this weekend.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk arrived in Kyiv on Monday for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The pair are set to discuss bilateral relations and the ongoing grain shipment and trucking dispute between their two countries. Tusk, who returned to power in Poland last month, vowed to continue to support Ukraine in its almost 2-year war with Russia.
Będziemy inwestować w firmy w Polsce i w Ukrainie, które będą produkowały, działały na rzecz zwiększenia naszych możliwości obronnych i Ukrainy, i Polski, i całej Europy. I będzie to także bardzo opłacalne biznesowo przedsięwzięcie dla obu stron.
During his visit, Tusk attended a memorial ceremony for Ukraine's Unity Day, which marks the country's long struggle for independence from eastern and western neighbors. President Zelensky announced they would be receiving a new defensive package from Warsaw.
The far right is rising across Europe, and the next European Parliament could be the most right-wing ever. According to polls, if the nationalist parties joined in a single group, it could become the largest one in the chamber. The European Conservative and Reformists include Fratelli d'Italia, Spain's Vox, and Poland's Right and Justice Party, while France's Rassemblement National, Germany's Alternative für Deutschland, and Italy's Lega belong to Identity and Democracy. A merger seems unlikely.
Non c'è questa possibilità perché comunque sono 2 gruppi differenti che hanno specificità politiche diverse. Quello che ho l'onore di presiedere viene da una tradizione politica, quella conservatrice, che ha radici, che ha caratteristiche diverse da quelle di ID.
More likely, some parties will switch groups. Another important factor will be whether non-affiliated populist parties will join one group or the other. The most relevant is Viktor Orban's Fidesz, and some are already trying to seduce them.
Comunque il partito che esprime il governo di un paese dell'Unione Europea, quindi siamo ben disposti a lavorare con loro in quest'ottica, cioè capendo che uniti siamo più forti nel portare avanti le nostre istanze.
It seems clear that in the next term, far-right parties will have more power to influence policies in Brussels. But according to experts, this could also drive them to soften their stances.
They are Eurosceptic because they feel that they cannot influence the Brussels decision-making process. The moment they are part of the game, part of the decision-making process, they become, some of them, again, I'm not talking about all of them, but they become less Eurosceptic, and they want to be also seen as pro-European. In fact, many of them see themselves as pro-European, even though in Brussels they're not seen as such.
The far right will certainly be in the next European Parliament. It remains to be seen, though, how far they can go to forge alliances and hold their cards at the same time.
Dozens of family members of the hostages held in Gaza have stormed into a financial meeting of Israel's parliament, demanding the release of their relatives. The protest came after Israel's government announced the death of another hostage and appears far from achieving its goals of freeing more than 100 others and crushing Hamas.
אני אומר לכם שנעשה הכל על מנת שהילדים, האחים, הנשים שיחזרו הביתה ויחזרו בשלום.
The families of the Israelis killed at the Nova Music Festival during Hamas's 7th of October attack are hoping to breathe new life into the site of the massacre by planting trees in the area. According to Israeli authorities, 364 people were killed there, with at least 40 hostages taken. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected Hamas's latest truce suggestion. According to Netanyahu, Hamas's demands are just unacceptable, and Israel would soon return to pre-war status quo. Hamas's suggestion would be a fatal injury to Israel's security, Netanyahu said.
החמאס דורש תמורת שחרור חטופינו את סיום המלחמה, הוצאת כוחותינו מעזה, שחרור כל הרוצחים והאנסים של הנוח'בה, והשארת חמאס על כנו. אם נסכים לכך, לוחמינו נפלו לשווא. אם נסכים לכך, לא נוכל להבטיח את ביטחון אזרחינו, לא נוכל להחזיר את המפונים בבטחה לבתיהם, וה7 באוקטובר הבא יהיה רק עניין של זמן.
Earlier this year, Netanyahu rejected a two-state solution for a post-war scenario presented by his American and European allies. Domestically, the Prime Minister is meeting rising pressures as Israelis demand the government do more to bring back hostages home, even if that means truce or ceasefire with Hamas. According to the Wall Street Journal, the United States, Egypt and Qatar will try to launch negotiations this week, which would start with a release of hostages and eventually lead to a withdrawal of Israeli forces. On Sunday, an Israeli airstrike killed a Hezbollah official in Lebanon. According to Lebanese sources, several civilians were injured.
Rain and high wind warnings have been issued across the UK as Storm Aisha continues to hit the country, bringing rain and gusts of up to 160 kilometers per hour. Overnight, the storm left more than 55,000 homes in the UK without power and triggered more than 80 flood warnings. Many transport services have been cancelled or delayed. However, the National Weather Service has said that Storm Aisha is now, quote, moving away. In Ireland, a cleanup operation is underway after the weather caused considerable damage. One person has died, according to local media, which also said that more than 100 buildings had fallen over and that 230,000 homes were without electricity. Disturbances were also reported on public transport. The Irish Met Office is advising people to stay away from the coast. After two discriminatory incidents this weekend, FIFA President Gianni Infantino suggested an automatic forfeit for any team whose fans have committed racism. Coventry player Casey Palmer and AC Milan goalkeeper Mike Maignan both faced monkey gestures during their matches, leading to Maignan forfeiting his team's game against Udinese. He said more needs to be done to combat racism.
È qualcosa che non deve essere nel mondo del calcio, ma purtroppo fa tanti anni che questa qua succede.
Pierre Poire, executive director of the FAIR network, said Italy's right-wing government had created a hostile environment where racism could thrive.
Don't forget, we also in Italy have a backdrop of a far-right government for whom these sort of issues are not a priority. Sometimes you can understand how fans are confused. They're being told by football players not to racially abuse them, and then they're being told by the government that immigration is bad and immigrants are being demonized every week.
AC Milan has fully backed their goalkeeper. A Udinese representative has also pledged the club will take action and implemented a social media blackout in support of Maignan. His France teammate Kylian Mbappé showed his support on X.
Thousands of people protested in Galicia against the local government's handling of the plastic pellet crisis on Sunday. Hundreds of thousands of small white pellets have washed ashore in northern Spain since the beginning of January, after falling from a container ship off the coast of Portugal last month. Among the protesters were the main opposition candidates in Galicia's regional elections, which will take place on the 18th of February. Local authorities declared an environmental emergency on the 9th of January. Galicia, in collaboration with the neighbouring region of Asturias, also affected by the crisis, asked the Spanish central government for help. The Spanish Public Prosecutor's Office has opened an investigation into the environmental crisis, fearing that the pellets have toxic properties and could jeopardise food safety.
Two people are reported to have died after a Russian private jet carrying 6 people crashed in Afghanistan over the weekend. On Monday, the Taliban announced they had rescued the other 4 remaining passengers. According to Moscow, the aircraft was operating as a charter ambulance traveling from Thailand to Russia. After making a stopover in India to refuel, the plane disappeared from radars. According to the Taliban, the aircraft crashed in a mountainous area of Badakhshan province, around 250 kilometers northeast of Kabul.
India's Prime Minister inaugurated Monday a disputed Hindu temple in the city of Ayodhya. The ruling party expects this will catapult him to a record 3rd successive term in the next elections. The temple, which is still under construction, is dedicated to Hinduism's Lord Ram and fulfills a long-standing demand by millions of Hindus. Yet, the temple lies atop of the debris of the 16th century Babri Mosque, which was destroyed in 1992 by a mob of Hindu nationalists. The demolition triggered bloody riots across India that killed 2,000 people. In 2019, India's Supreme Court deemed the mosque destruction a flagrant violation, but granted the site to Hindus, offering Muslims an alternative plot.